While the election results are pending in Uganda, the opposition leader Bobi Wine is under arrest. Welcome to Kenya Lens Media, where we give you news updates the way they break. Kindly, if you are new here, consider subscribing. Now, a day after Uganda's national election held on January 15, 2026, security forces reportedly surrounded the home of the opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi, commonly known as Bobi Wine, effectively placing him and his wife under what his party describes as unlawful house arrest. The heavy deployment has sparked urgent questions about constitutional rights, political freedoms, and the conduct of the election in the nation long criticized for repression of dissent. Officials with the National Unity Platform, Uganda's main opposition party, said late Friday that military and police units encircled Wine's home in Magere, Wakiso district shortly after after he cast his ballot. The party accused the state of breaching the residence fence, erecting tents inside the compound and preventing anyone, including Wine and his spouse, from leaving or entering the property. NUP officials insisted that these actions had no legal basis, arguing that restricting a presidential candidate's movement without formal charges or court warrant appears to violate fundamental rights guaranteed by the Ugandan Constitution. The Tanzanian-based People Daily and Kenyan outlets also documented the siege, reporting that Bobi Wine publicly claimed that soldiers jumped over the fence and entered his compound, and that the home remained besieged with no one allowed to come in or go out. Authorities have offered different explanations. Uganda police stated that the presence of security personnel was intended to protect Wine because he is not an ordinary citizen. According to regional media reports, they said the deployment aimed at ensuring security rather than to restrict freedom. Uganda's election on January 15th saw incumbent President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni extend his long hold on power, with provisional results showing him in a commanding head of about 75 to 76% of votes counted, compared to roughly 19 to 21% for Bobi Wine. Museveni has been in office since 1986 and is seeking a seventh term, an outcome that has drawn scrutiny both domestically and internationally. The vote count occurred amid reports of internet blackout, logistic issues with biometric voter machines, and accusations of ballot irregularities, all factors that critics say undermine the credibility of the election. Wine's campaign accused authorities of massive ballot stuffing and harassment of polling agents. AFP journalists who visited the vicinity of Bobi Wine's residence late Friday described a heavy security presence outside the compound, though outward conditions appeared calm. Roads leading to the home were barricaded, and officers in combat gear were stationed at multiple points. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and other observers have documented a pattern of repression ahead of the election, including excessive force at rallies, arbitrary arrests, and intimidation of opposition supporters. A recent Amnesty International report described this as a brutal campaign of repression. At the heart of the controversy in the question of legal authority, critics including NUP officials and legal analysts say that there is no constitutional basis for placing a candidate under house detention without due process, such as formal charges or judicial oversight. Under Ugandan law, detentions and restrictions on movement typically require court order or clear statutory authority protections that are meant to guard against arbitrary state action. Legal experts have emphasized that prolonged confinement without legal justification can violate freedom of movement, privacy, and political rights enshrined in the nation's constitution. Similar concerns were raised in 2021 when a court ruled that security forces must end their siege on Bobi Wine's residence, noting that the home was not a proper detention facility and that authorities must either charge him or withdraw. The NUP has called on law enforcement to respect due process, stressing that if there are legitimate suspicions of wrongdoing, Bobi Wine should be presented in court and determine his status. This incident is not without precedent. Over the past decade, Bobi Wine, a former pop star turned politician, has faced multiple detentions, alleged beatings by security forces, and restrictions on his movement. In December 2025, Reuters reported that Bobi Wine was beaten alongside aides while campaigning in northern Uganda, signaling escalating tensions in the lead-up to the 2026 election. Human rights activists have documented the detention of hundreds of NUP supporters since campaigns began in 2025, with many held without formal charges or clear legal justification. Reports also surface of alleged abductions of other opposition candidates and activists, which critics argue form part of broader strategy to weaken political competition and dissuade public dissent. Observers point out that Uganda's election have long been marred with accusations of intimidation and unfair practices. According to Freedom in the World 2025 country report by Freedom House, while Uganda holds regular elections, their credibility has deteriorated amid harassment of civil society, media restrictions, and political prosecutions. The government has generally defended its use of security forces, arguing that maintaining order is crucial in a high-stakes political environment. President Museveni's ruling National Resistance Movement has framed its actions as necessary for stability ahead and during the election. Police and military spokespeople have repeatedly denied accusations that they are targeting political opponents, instead claiming they are responding to threats of unrest and violence. In some disputed incidents around the vote, police described actions against opposition supporters as defensive responses to alleged attacks on police stations or police centers. Yet for critics, such explanations ring hollow against a backdrop of internet shutdown, aggressive policing at opposition rallies, and the widespread use of force reported by human rights organizations. These practices, they argue, do not align with the democratic norms or Uganda's constitution guarantees. Uganda's election and reported siege on the opposition leader's home draw international attention to deeper questions about democratic governance in East Africa. Long-serving leaders in the region, and particularly in Uganda, have been criticized by global rights groups, foreign governments, and regional bodies for eroding civil liberties and consolidating power. The situation in Kampala has implications beyond national borders. International observers, including the United Nations Rights Office, noted that the election was conducted in an environment marked by widespread repression and intimidation. Regional stability in East Africa, already under pressure from economic challenges and political tensions, could be affected by perceived injustices or unrest following contested elections. The reported siege of Bobi Wine's home encapsulates larger issues around political freedoms, rule of law, and democratic integrity in Uganda, placing an opposition leader under what appears to be extrajudicial confinement without transparent legal basis, challenges fundamental constitutional protections, and raises the stakes for both domestic stability and international relations. For ordinary Ugandans, these developments matter because they signal whether political competition will be conducted on a level playing field or dominated by coercion. For regional partners and global democracies, Uganda's conduct may influence diplomatic ties, trade relations, and foreign aid decisions tied to human rights benchmarks. And at the moment when the nation's electoral process should reflect the will of the people, the actions of state security forces and the legal justifications or lack thereof behind them will shape Uganda's political trajectory for years to come. That is all for today, and if you are new here, kindly consider subscribing to our YouTube channel as a way of supporting us grow this platform.